Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special podcast of Your Week with St. Luke's General Conference edition. This is coming out on April 18th, and we are excited to have this information before you because our General Conference actually starts next week on Tuesday, and we will be coming with another special podcast that week as well. Now, we've talked with Alice and Derek all these last couple weeks, and they've really given us a great history and education on what General Conference is, what happened in 2019, and this week we're going to talk about what we think could happen or the major themes that you will be hearing about at General Conference 2024. Now, this is just talking out loud. The truth is there are going to be 800 plus delegates from around the world, and while a lot of us think we know what people will say and how people will vote, the truth is we don't know until we're in a room and the Holy Spirit is at work. We're going to be praying for it, though. But what are the topics we're going to be praying about? So let's go to our conversation with Alice and Derek about what's next for the United Methodist Church.
Okay. So what will happen at this General Conference? What do we need to be watching for? I know there's kind of 3 to 4 basic things that everyone's talking about, possibly could be voted on or could not happen. So could you give us a quick down and dirty, what are those that we should be listening for?
One thing I want to call out right now. So my involvement was I was in the weeds with it very, very much before. I have to say that Derek is doing that now. So he has been one of those major change agents that's been in the midst of this. And so Derek, first off, just thank you, buddy, because we are so grateful for how you have been faithful to this calling and how you have helped to shape thinking in so many different areas. You want to talk a little bit about what the major initiatives are?
Yeah, I will do that. I have to say though, Alice, you've been a part of some really critical moments as well, even as we're getting ready. And I just need to name out loud, I don't know if everybody knows, but there was a lot of work that was done in Florida and continue to be done even after that annual conference in 2019. And I got the beautiful opportunity to work with the great Jenn Stiles Williams in a lot of that work. And so if we're going to name names, let's name some names, okay?
That's right.
There have been some St. Lukers who have been doing some work, and that needs to be put out into the air. So, all right, I'll name 3 things really, really quickly. Regionalization. Regionalization is a huge conversation. There's a lot in that, but it is essentially a reorganization of how our church governs itself and how it organizes itself. And so there's a bunch of different pieces to this. Here's one critical piece. At the moment, our central conferences, again, those are the churches that are outside the United States. Those are the conferences outside of the United States, similar to, depending on how you want to talk about it, the US region, kind of our jurisdictional system, kind of. It's not completely aligned, but it's essentially the gathering, the 7 bodies of the church outside of the United States. They have the ability to adapt the Book of Discipline, certain parts of the Book of Discipline, to their context. For instance, the trust clause is a universal, global part of what it means to be United Methodist. However, you have to adapt the trust clause when you get outside the US because laws around land and real estate and who owns what and whose names are on what and what that means and all of that's different outside the US. And so do we all abide by the trust clause? Pretty much, but it looks different outside the United States. So I just named that. The folks outside the United States have the ability to adapt parts of the Book of Discipline. We're not all agreed on what parts of the Book of Discipline can be adapted. And so I'm not saying it's a free-for-all, but it kind of. All right, so here's why this is important. Here's why it's important. We in the United States actually don't have the ability to adapt the Book of Discipline to our context.
Right.
And so it has created this sort of dynamic where when we need to adapt our Book of Discipline for our context, we have to go all the way to General Conference. In the Congo, when there needs to be an adaptation to the Book of Discipline for their context, they go to I think that they are the West Africa Central Conference.
Right.
No, they're the Africa Central Conference. They are the Africa Central Conference. So they go to the Africa Central Conference, and that's where they get to do that work there. They don't have to go all the way to the General Conference. My point is, it's created this dynamic where there is not equal power sharing. And so regionalization is one of these ways by which we are trying to correct that. There's so many other ways that I could talk about regionalization. It's a really important piece, a package of legislation. There's actually a few different proposals around regionalization. Let me just be clear. Well, there are different proposals. One of them is called the Christmas Covenant. One's being brought to the plenary from the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. There's another one that was written years ago by the Connectional Table. These are all different groups and bodies within our church. Unlike 2019, where you had these different plans and they all had different outcomes for the church, all of the regionalization petitions have the same outcome: a regionalized church that is equitable, that is decolonized. Again, the US is not the center. And so we want to decenter the decision-making. All of these pieces, regionalization is trying to deal with. And here's one last piece that I'll say about regionalization. Again, there's so much to talk about. Actually, there's two things I'm going to say. One thing I'm going to say about regionalization: we didn't start talking about regionalization on the heels of 2019. We've been talking about regionalization since 1924. The first time that someone at General Conference said, hey, the US should become its own central conference was in 1924. And every time we tried to move towards a more regionalized structure, there's been some reason why we can't do it. We've finally come to this place where many believe that the future of the UMC really depends on whether we can get a regionalized structure. So at one point, we've been talking about regionalization for about 100 years. Okay, that's one. Two, here's the other piece that I want to just name around regionalization. It actually, there's how do I say it? There's always like, well, if you do this, like, what does that mean? And if we go in this direction, then will that have to change that? And all of these sort of like, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Because of the way our polity is structured, we can't even begin to do work of what regionalization is going to mean for the church without permission to do that. We need to pass regionalization at General Conference so we can figure out what it means for the agencies, what it means for the election of bishops, what it means. We actually cannot, with credibility and integrity, do that kind of work without the permission of the General Conference to explore it. And so that's why this is so important. Okay, that's just one piece. Alice, I know you want to get something in here, so go for it.
Two things really quick. So even if we do pass regionalization in some form, it also has to be ratified at the annual conference level afterwards. So it's not just what we do at General Conference. It has ramifications, and it could either make it or break it in 2025 when it goes back to annual conferences all across to vote on. So that's a piece. The other thing I want to come back to on the regionalization, it's really important. All of the plans that they're talking about, the different groups and whatnot, coming forward with regionalization ideas, continue to keep our connection, continue to keep our doctrinal standards, continue to keep who we are at the core. How they go about it, it might be a little more contextualized wherever they are. How we do that might look different. But the core we are as United Methodists will not be lost. So I want to make sure that that's understood.
Yeah. And if I can add on to that real quick, the amendment process is because it's the part of the constitution of our book of discipline.
Right.
The theological task can't be changed.
Right.
And that's been, that's important. It's the stuff after that that can be changed in General Conference. The constitution and stuff before that has that ratification process. So different parts get changed in different ways. And there's one part that does not get changed
at all.
Our theological doctrine does not get changed.
Rootedness, whatever you want to call
history.
It.
So
regionalization is big deal. There's a couple other big deals too. Regionalization is a big one. Another one is what's called the revised social principles. So the United Methodist Church is unique in the sense that we actually have a document, we have a set of statements This is connected to our book of resolutions. It has, it's a set of statements of not just what we believe, but the world we believe that God wants.
Yeah.
We believe that God has called us as United Methodists to not just do really great church in the four walls, but to actually, a part of our mission statement, to transform the world. Disciples of Jesus Christ who transform the world. Okay, what does that transformed world look like? That transformed world looks like, in many ways, our social principles. The social principles has things such as, we believe that the world that God wants allows for people to make adequate wages for the work that they do. And we were saying this stuff in the turn of the 20th century, my friends. So this is way before 2019, way before even regionalization, way before any of the, before even us coming together to be the United Methodist Church. A part of our heritage is that we had, in the turn of the century, what was called a social creed. Now, move forward in '68, when we united as the United Methodist Church, we started work on what was then in 1972 called the social principles. And since that document was created and was affirmed at that '72 General Conference, we've been amending and changing little bits and pieces along the way. But that original social principles document, it honestly was written from a very U.S.-centric perspective. We did not have many U.S. voices at all at that General Conference, let alone at the table. And so we've been amending here and there along the way, but there was a desire that we really needed to do a full revision of the social principles. And so for the last 8 years, a ton of work, actually probably a little bit more than that, ton of work's been done, writing teams from all over the worldwide connection, people speaking into the revision, people then looking at drafts and speaking into those, and then coming back. And so we have before the General Conference now revised social principles. It's literally a rewrite, and it's from a global church perspective. And so that piece of that whole set of pieces of legislation is also before the General Conference. And I'll just say this last piece about the revised social principles. It's important to us in the US, but it's really important to folks outside the US. And I've said this many times. If you live in a country that doesn't value the role and voice of women, but you're a member of the United Methodist Church, you get to say that the church I'm a part of values the voice and the gifts and the perspective of women, even if my government doesn't. The church I'm a part of does. And friends, that is such a big deal to our friends outside the United States, to our United Methodist siblings outside the US. So the revised social principles is another piece that's before the General Conference. And finally, I would say that there is an effort this General Conference to remove all language that is harmful to LGBTQ plus individuals within the United Methodist Church. That's including paragraphs around ordination, around marriage, around funding, all of that is before the General Conference. Whereas, the regionalization has to pass by a supermajority, 2/3 at General Conference and then 2/3 of annual conferences in order for that to fully pass. The revised social principles and removal of language really only need a majority, a simple majority for those measures to pass. And we are hopeful. We are not certain, because there's very few things that are certain in this life. We are hopeful that because of so much that we've already talked about in this episode, St. Luke's, that we are hopeful that those petitions will go forward and that we will leave General Conference. I'll say it this way: the church on the ground is already different. The church on the ground is already made. St. Luke's has already made some statements about who they are and who they're going to continue to be as they represent United Methodism, and you're part of Orlando. So as my small little congregation that I'm a part of, San Marco Church in Jacksonville, so many congregations across the US and around the world have said, this is who we are, this is who we're going to be. And so much of that lines up with what we hope to happen at General Conference. And in a sense, what we're hoping is that General Conference will get a clue and catch up to the church that already exists on the ground.
Come on. All right. And if it doesn't, we'll keep living into what it means to be an inclusive United Methodist Church.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. Amen.
There are two other things, and Derek, we're going to need to kind of wrap it up, but there are two other pieces that have to happen, we hope, right?
Mhm.
One is the repeal of the original harmful language that was added in 1972, pulled from the Book of Discipline, actually, the harmful language being pulled out of the Book of Discipline, the removal of that language. And we're hearing that, again, we don't know, but we are hopeful, but we are hearing that there is more support for this all around the globe, all around the globe. Not just within the US. So this is one that I'm really hopeful can happen. And if that happens, if that's voted on at the floor of this general conference, then that becomes the new structure, not the new structure, but the new law of the church, if you will.
Right.
And that means the Book of Discipline will have to be revised. So that's really exciting. And our hope
And
is
churches will have to make decisions,
absolutely
understanding how they will live into it in their context.
in their context, and that gives us the freedom, right? And that's
Right.
really what this will do, is it'll free us in a way that we haven't been able to do before. So there's that. And remember the abeyance thing that I was talking about before, charges that might be brought up against clergy or whatever, that too would be taken care of by this, because then there's no reason to have charges per se. So there's a lot of positives around that. So we're hearing that. And then, Derek, I don't know, is there anything you wanted to say around that?
Let's keep going. Yep.
And the last piece has to do with, and I don't know if you were going to talk about this or not, but it was also to remove the traditional plan, right?
Yeah.
Going back, and there have been some, the South Carolina has written, a resolution and whatnot, but to literally back away from what took place at 2019 and say, listen, that this does not serve us as who we are. And so we want to, if you will, repeal those things that were put in place at 2019. What else, Derek? What else are you hoping?
I mean, there's a lot of
Those
other
are big
stuff. I
ones.
mean, those are
Yeah.
three big ones. There's other, the budget is going to be, and we talked a little bit about that. That's a big deal coming before us. We've got some other different pieces that may or may not get time in committee and on the floor. Some things related to the conflict and the continued war in Gaza, and the United Methodist Church speaking into that may or may not get floor time. Because here's the deal. There's even Alice Williams has a piece of legislation around deacons having sacramental authority, which I think is super, super important. But friends, part of the deal is that there's only so much time that we have at General Conference, and so much bandwidth and so much work that has to be done. The three big ones are regionalization, revised social principles, and removal of language. It's not to say that we don't care about some of the other pieces. There's something coming from the discipleship. Discipleship Ministries has a division of ministries of young people, and they've got a restructure that they want to put in front of the church. I don't know how much time that's going to get. I helped work on that legislation as well. I don't know how much time it's going to get. It's not to say it's not important. It's that we have a limited amount of time to do some things that's really going to reshape how our church both operates and who we get to be in ministry with at a policy level. And so because we only have so much time, we're really trying to do the things that will make those changes that we really need for the future of the church.
And I want to go back to what we said something earlier, right? This is a pivotal moment because, as I said, the demographics of the church are changing. We are no longer going to be US centric, that kind of thing. This is a moment that we need to hold as very tenderly precious as we can. It's an interesting time to be in this place because this type of change, the opportunities, this is the best scenario that we probably will ever have for so much of this change. So that's really, really important. And then the other piece that I would just want to add too, we're seeing a shift even among the bishops and in their support and how things are looking. So it's going to be a very, very interesting conference in general. Plus the fact that we haven't done this in a while.
Yeah.
So this is going to be post-pandemic, post-disaffiliation. My belief is the mood in that room is going to be very different than what I experienced in 2016 and very different than what I experienced in 2019.
Because not only do we have the disaffiliations around this, but I mean, COVID diminished everybody, like all churches.
Absolutely.
All, not just
Absolutely.
the United Methodist Church, but all churches. The rhythm and pattern of worship attendance, all of that is just different. Everything is different. What we went through as a United States in terms of politics, in terms of race, I mean, it has just changed the way we should gather.
Yeah.
And the work that we should do. According to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I'm just so grateful you guys are representing us. And we have what, 16 lay and 6, is that right? Or 12?
We have 8 clergy and 8 lay that are representing as
16.
delegates for Florida at General Conference. 16 total. Yeah.
So huge thank you and lots of prayers. That's what you can do, is be in prayer for all of our delegates. Send some love to them, and
Yes.
And we'll be talking as a congregation and our leadership about our responses as well. Alice, did you want to say something?
Well, the only thing I was going to add, just we know that GCFA is going to come with a 40% reduction overall. I mean, we just know that that's going to happen. I just want to make sure that people understand this is not a moment of scarcity.
No.
This is a moment of opportunity for us as a church to look and really discern what's the most important things that we do, that we are calling us to do.
Yeah.
St. Luke's, I think a lot of it's been what we've been called to do. Remember, we talked about, we are called to be the hands and feet of Christ to the world. This is a moment where we can do that and do it in such a powerful way. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
And our Bishop St. Lucas, we're going to have a follow-up episode with all these. This is going to be in multiple episodes, by the way. And we're going to have a follow-up with our leaders, but also you're going to find a place on the website where you can go to and watch and follow General Conference. Our bishop, from what I understand, is going to be reporting kind of as we go along, so that we'll be able to see it. And we may even get our own Alice to do a little reporting too for us.
Only if I can bring
Beautiful.
All right. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
I'm so excited about what can happen.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, St. Luke's, for being awesome. The whole Florida conference is better because of you all.
Oh, you're sweet. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alice and Derek, for your incredible time with us. We have learned so much about kind of what General Conference is, where we've been, and where we're going. We are going to be coming back next week with a special podcast with your clergy as we kind of sit in that first week of legislative sessions and find out sort of maybe where we're going and what's happening at our General Conference. Remember, it's in Charlotte. You'll be able to, when the plenary sessions happen, watch it online. You can find that at flumc.org or umc.org. And watch our social media and our website for more information. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week at this special session on Thursday.